What made an entire grade riot? The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Principal Hendricks adjusted his tie and stepped up to the podium in our packed auditorium. It was August 28, 2019, 3 days into my senior year at Westfield High, and something about his smug expression made my stomach drop. "Students," he began, his voice echoing through the microphone, effective immediately, "we are implementing a comprehensive zero-tolerance discipline policy to restore order and academic excellence to this institution." I exchanged glances with my best friend Maya, who was sitting next to me in the third row. We'd been looking forward to this year since freshman orientation. Senior privileges, prom planning, college applications, all the milestones that were supposed to make up for 4 years of standardized tests and cafeteria mystery meat. Hendricks clicked to his first PowerPoint slide, dress code violations. My heart sank as he read off a list that seemed designed by someone who'd never actually met a teenager. Shirts must be tucked in at all times, no exceptions. Shoes must be closed-toe and appropriate for a professional environment. Hair accessories were limited to natural colors only. The kicker. 3 violations meant automatic suspension. Additionally, he continued, advancing to the next slide, tardiness will no longer be tolerated. Students arriving even 30 seconds after the bell will receive immediate detention. 5 tardies result in a 1-day suspension. Around me, I could hear the collective intake of breath from my classmates. Our school was massive, nearly 2,800 students, and the hallways between some classes required a solid 4 minutes to navigate. The administration had always understood this. Hell, most teachers didn't even start taking attendance until a few minutes after the bell. But Hendricks wasn't done. Click. Cancelled activities. The words hit like a physical blow. Senior skip day, cancelled. Spring fling dance, cancelled. And then the big one, delivered with all the emotion of someone reading a grocery list, after careful consideration, prom has been indefinitely postponed while we assess whether students can demonstrate the maturity level required for such privileges. The auditorium erupted. Seniors started shouting, underclassmen looked confused, and I felt something hot and angry building in my chest. Maya grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin. "This can't be legal," she whispered. Principal Hendricks held up a hand, completely unfazed by the chaos he'd just unleashed. "Furthermore," he said, waiting for quiet, "the open campus policy is revoked. All students will remain on school grounds during lunch periods and will eat in the cafeteria under supervised conditions." That's when it hit me, this wasn't about discipline or academic excellence. This was about control. Pure, authoritarian control over nearly 3,000 teenagers who had done nothing to deserve it. I'd been at Westfield since I was 14. I'd watched 3 different principals come and go, each one understanding that high school students needed some degree of autonomy to function. We weren't prisoners. We were young adults, months away from voting in college and real jobs. But looking at Hendricks up there, straightening his papers with mechanical precision, I realized he saw us as exactly that, prisoners in his own personal correctional facility. "Questions will be addressed through proper administrative channels," he concluded. Dismissed. As we filed out in stunned silence, I made a decision that would change everything. If Principal Hendricks wanted to declare war on the student body, then he was going to get one. He just had no idea who he was dealing with. The first casualties started falling within hours. By lunch that same day, 14 students had already been written up for dress code violations. Sarah Chen, who'd been student council treasurer for 2 years, got detention because her polo shirt came untucked when she bent down to pick up a dropped textbook. Marcus Williams, star of our debate team, was cited for wearing canvas sneakers instead of professional footwear. But it was what happened to Jenny Morrison that really lit the fuse. Jenny was a junior with type 1 diabetes who carried her blood glucose monitor and emergency supplies in a small purple backpack. She'd had medical clearance for it since freshman year. Every teacher knew about her condition. Hell, she'd probably saved 3 different students from passing out during particularly brutal PE classes by sharing her emergency snacks. At 11:47 a.m., exactly 13 minutes before 4th period ended, Jenny felt her blood sugar dropping. I watched from across the hallway as she tried to discreetly check her monitor. That's when Vice Principal Torres, apparently Hendricks' new attack dog, appeared out of nowhere. "Backpacks are not permitted during class hours," Torres announced loud enough for half the hallway to hear. "Zero tolerance means 0 exceptions." "Sir, I have a medical condition," Jenny said, her voice already getting that shaky quality that meant her sugar was really tanking. "I have documentation from." "I don't care what paperwork you think you have," Torres cut her off. "Rules are rules. Report to the office immediately." I couldn't just stand there. "She's diabetic," I called out, stepping into the hallway. "She needs that medication." Torres turned his attention to me with the kind of smile that made my skin crawl. "And you are?" "Alex Chen." I lifted my chin. "Student body vice president." "Well, Mr. Chen, unless you want to join Miss Morrison in the office, I suggest you mind your own business." By then, a small crowd had gathered. Jenny was visibly pale now, swaying slightly on her feet. This wasn't just bureaucratic nonsense anymore, this was actually dangerous. "Jenny, do you need me to call the nurse?" I asked, ignoring Torres completely. "That won't be necessary," Torres said. "Miss Morrison can visit the nurse after she serves her detention for violating school policy." That's when Maya appeared at my shoulder, along with 3 other seniors I recognized from student government. "This is insane," Maya said. "She has a legitimate medical need." "What's insane," Torres replied, "is students who think rules don't apply to them. All of you, disperse immediately or face disciplinary action." The bell rang. Jenny was now gripping the wall for support, and Torres was still standing there like some kind of fascist hall monitor, completely oblivious to the fact that a student was having a medical emergency right in front of him. That's when I pulled out my phone and started recording. "For the record," I said loudly, making sure my voice would pick up clearly, "it's 11:53 a.m. on August 28th. A diabetic student is being denied access to her medical supplies by Vice Principal Torres, who is threatening disciplinary action against any student who tries to help her." Torres lunged for my phone, but I was faster. "Delete that immediately." "Actually, no," I said, backing away. "This seems like something the school board might want to see." The crowd around us had grown to at least 20 students, all of them recording now. Torres looked around wildly, probably just realizing he'd made a massive mistake. Finally, he allowed Jenny to access her supplies. But it was too late. The videos were already uploading to social media, and Principal Hendricks had just given us our first piece of ammunition. The war had officially begun. Within 48 hours, the video of Jenny's incident had over 10,000 views across Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Hashtag Westfield 0 cents was trending locally, and my phone was buzzing non-stop with messages from classmates, parents, and even local news reporters asking for comments. But Principal Hendricks wasn't backing down. If anything, he was doubling down. Thursday morning brought a new announcement over the intercom during first period. Attention students. Effective immediately, the use of personal electronic devices during school hours is strictly prohibited. This includes hallways, cafeterias, and all common areas. Devices must remain in lockers from 7:30 a.m. until dismissal. Mrs. Patterson, my AP literature teacher, actually laughed out loud. Well, that's completely unenforceable, she muttered, then caught herself. I mean, please turn off your phones, class. But Hendricks wasn't done. At 9:15 a.m., Torres and two security guards I'd never seen before started conducting random locker searches. They weren't looking for drugs or weapons, they were confiscating phones, chapstick, apparently a cosmetic violation, and even textbooks that students had covered with decorative paper. By lunch, the mood in the cafeteria was toxic. The new, supervised dining policy meant we had to sit in assigned rows of plastic chairs facing forward, like some kind of prison mess hall. No talking above a whisper. No getting up without permission. And definitely no phones to document any of it. This is psychological warfare, Maya whispered as we picked at our soggy pizza. She was right. In just 5 days, Hendricks had managed to strip away nearly every aspect of normal high school life. That's when I noticed something that made my blood boil. At the faculty table in the corner, Principal Hendricks was sitting with 3 adults I didn't recognize, 2 men in expensive suits and a woman with a tablet, all of them taking notes and nodding approvingly as they surveyed our silent, miserable cafeteria. Who are those people? I asked quietly. Trevor Martinez, whose mom worked in the district office, leaned over from the next row. Consultants, he whispered. My mom said Hendricks hired some company called Academic Excellence Solutions to help him restructure the learning environment. Everything suddenly clicked into place. This wasn't just some power-hungry principal having a breakdown. This was a calculated, systematic dismantling of our school culture, and someone was getting paid for it. I pulled out my phone discreetly, pretending to tie my shoe while I snapped photos of the consultants. That's when I felt a heavy hand on my shoulder. Mr. Chen. It was Torres, flanked by the new security guards. Phone. Now. I was just. Zero tolerance means zero exceptions, he said, echoing his words from the Jenny incident. Your device will be returned at the end of the school day. I had no choice but to hand it over, but not before I caught Maya's eye and gave her a subtle nod toward the consultants. She understood immediately, she was always sharp like that. As Torres walked away with my phone, I realized Hendricks had just made another critical mistake. By confiscating devices from student government officers, kids whose parents were lawyers and school board members, he was about to face a level of pushback he clearly hadn't anticipated. But more than that, seeing those consultants sitting there like they were conducting some kind of behavioral experiment on us, it crystallized something that had been building in my chest since that first assembly. We weren't just dealing with bad policies anymore. We were dealing with people who literally saw us as lab rats, testing how far they could push before we broke. The problem was, they had no idea how strong we actually were when we stood together. And they were about to find out. The breaking point came on Friday afternoon during what was supposed to be our lunch period. I was sitting in my assigned spot, row C, seat 14, mechanically chewing a stale ham sandwich when a new lunch monitor, a stern woman with a clipboard who introduced herself as Ms. Rodriguez, made an announcement that sent ice through my veins. Attention students. Beginning Monday, all lunch periods will operate under silent study protocol. Talking is prohibited. Students will use this time for academic enrichment and reflection on proper behavioral standards. The cafeteria, already operating at barely a whisper, went completely dead. I could hear the hum of the industrial refrigerators, the distant sound of traffic outside, even the scratching of Ms. Rodriguez's pen against her clipboard. Nearly 400 students sitting in perfect, terrified silence. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. At the far end of the cafeteria, near the emergency exit that led to the senior courtyard, 2 maintenance workers were installing something on the doors. Heavy-duty locks. The kind that required a key from both sides. Maya followed my gaze and her face went pale. The senior courtyard wasn't just where we ate lunch when the weather was nice, it was where student government held meetings, where the drama club rehearsed, where kids went to decompress between classes. It was the one place in the entire school that felt like it belonged to us. And they were sealing it off. I stood up without thinking, my plastic chair scraping loudly against the linoleum. Every head in the cafeteria turned toward me, including Ms. Rodriguez's. Sit down immediately, she barked. No movement without permission. I need to use the restroom, I said, loud enough that my voice carried across the silent room. Request denied. Bathroom breaks are scheduled for 12:47 p.m. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 12:22. They expected us to sit in silence for 25 more minutes before we were even allowed basic biological functions. This is ridiculous, I said, not bothering to lower my voice anymore. We're not prisoners. Ms. Rodriguez's eyes lit up like she'd been waiting for this moment. Mr. Chen, report to the office immediately for insubordination and disruption of the learning environment. But something interesting happened as I gathered my things. Instead of the usual nervous shuffling and averted eyes I'd been seeing all week, students were looking directly at me. Some were nodding slightly. Others had expressions I recognized from every rebellion movie I'd ever watched, that mixture of fear and determination that meant people were finally ready to fight back. As I walked toward the cafeteria exit, my sneakers squeaking against the floor in the oppressive silence, I heard something that stopped me cold. A single, slow clap from somewhere behind me. Then another. And another. Within 10 seconds, nearly half the cafeteria was applauding, not the polite golf clap of school assemblies, but the kind of sustained, defiant applause that meant something. Ms. Rodriguez was frantically blowing her whistle and shouting for order, but the sound just kept building. All students participating in this disruption will face immediate suspension, she screamed over the noise. That's when Maya stood up, still clapping. Then Trevor Martinez. Then Sarah Chen, despite already having 2 dress code violations. Within 30 seconds, at least 200 students were on their feet, applauding in perfect unison while Ms. Rodriguez and the security guards looked around helplessly. They couldn't suspend half the school. Could they? As I reached the cafeteria doors, I turned back to see Principal Hendricks himself storming into the room, his face red with fury. But what struck me wasn't his anger, it was the look of genuine surprise on his face. For the first time since this nightmare began, Richard Hendricks looked like a man who was losing control of his own game. And in that moment, I knew exactly what we had to do. The suspension letter started arriving Monday morning like a plague. By 8:30 a.m., 127 students had been called to the office and handed identical pink slips informing them they were banned from campus for 3 days due to coordinated disruption of the educational environment. Maya was among them. So were most of the student government officers, half the varsity football team, and basically every kid who'd stood up during Friday's cafeteria incident. But here's the thing Hendricks didn't count on, he just created 127 very angry students with 3 days of free time and nothing to lose. I somehow avoided the initial wave of suspensions, probably because Torres couldn't prove I'd orchestrated the applause. But walking through the hallways that morning felt like navigating a ghost town. Entire friend groups had been decimated. AP classes were running with barely 10 students. The senior parking lot looked like a used car dealership after a going out of business sale. At 10:15 a.m., I was sitting in what remained of my calculus class when my phone buzzed with a text from Maya, emergency meeting. Trevor's house. Skip 6th period. The irony wasn't lost on me, Principal Hendricks had just made skipping class an act of rebellion instead of laziness. Trevor's basement was packed when I arrived at 1:30 p.m. Nearly 40 students had shown up, including some faces I barely recognized, freshmen and sophomores who'd gotten swept up in the suspension dragnet. The energy in the room was electric, like the air before a thunderstorm. Okay, Maya said, standing on Trevor's coffee table to address the crowd. We all know why we're here. Hendricks thinks he can break us by picking us off one by one. He's wrong. She pulled out her laptop and connected it to Trevor's TV. I've been doing research on our new principal. Turns out Richard Hendricks has quite the track record. The screen filled with a newspaper article from Phoenix, Arizona, dated 2 years ago. The headline read, Principal transferred after student walkout forces district review. Apparently, Maya continued, Hendricks tried this exact same playbook at Desert Ridge High School. Zero tolerance policies, canceled traditions, hired the same consulting firm, Academic Excellence Solutions. The students organized a peaceful protest that lasted 3 days. Media got involved, parents sued the district, and Hendricks got quietly transferred to avoid further controversy. A kid named Jordan Chen, no relation to me or Sarah, raised his hand. So he's basically a professional school destroyer. Gets better, Maya said, clicking to the next slide. Before Phoenix, he was at a school in Michigan. Same story. Before that, Tennessee. This guy has been bouncing around the country for 5 years, implementing these policies, causing chaos, then disappearing before anyone can hold him accountable. The room erupted in angry murmurs. Trevor stood up, his face flushed. So we're just his latest experiment. Not if we stop him first, I said, an idea forming in my head. Maya, did any of those other schools actually succeed in getting rid of him permanently? She shook her head. That's the problem. He always gets transferred to another district. Promoted, even. Apparently, some school boards think controversy means reform-minded leadership. That's when Sarah Chen spoke up from the back of the room. My mom works for Channel 7 News, she said quietly. She's been asking questions about what's happening at school. Says they're interested in doing a story about the suspensions. The room went quiet. Getting media involved would escalate things beyond anything we'd imagined. It would also make Hendricks desperate, and desperate people did unpredictable things. But looking around at all those faces, kids who'd never been in trouble before, honor roll students who were now banned from their own school, I realized we were already past the point of no return. Here's what we're going to do, I said, standing up. We're going to give Principal Hendricks exactly what he's been trying to avoid his entire career. We're going to make sure this is the last school he ever destroys. The plan we hatched in Trevor's basement was ambitious, maybe even crazy, but it had one thing going for it, we had nothing left to lose. Over the next 2 days, while the suspended students served their punishment at home, we turned into the most organized rebellion Westfield High had ever seen. Maya coordinated social media campaigns from her bedroom, creating detailed timelines of every policy change and documented incident. Sarah worked her mom's media connections, feeding them quotes and video evidence. Trevor used his dad's office printer to run off hundreds of flyers outlining our demands. And me? I focused on the one thing Hendricks hadn't counted on, the parents. See, when you suspend 127 students simultaneously, you're not just punishing kids. You're creating 127 families who suddenly have to scramble for childcare, rearrange work schedules, and explain to their neighbors why their honor roll student is home on a Tuesday afternoon. Parents who'd been willing to give the new principal the benefit of the doubt were now dealing with the direct consequences of his policies. Mrs. Patterson had slipped me the parent contact information for our AP Lit class, technically against policy, but she was as fed up as we were. By Wednesday evening, I'd made 43 phone calls to parents of suspended students, walking them through exactly what had happened and why. The response was immediate and furious. Are you telling me, Mrs. Davidson said when I called about her daughter Emma, that my child was suspended for clapping? For showing support for a diabetic student who was denied medical care? That's exactly what I'm telling you, ma'am. And it gets worse. By Thursday morning, Principal Hendricks was dealing with a full-scale parent revolt. The main office phone rang constantly with angry calls. 3 different parents had already contacted lawyers about potential discrimination lawsuits. And according to Trevor's mom, an emergency school board meeting had been called for Friday evening. But Hendrix wasn't going down without a fight. At 7:45 a.m. Thursday, just 15 minutes after first period started, every student still attending school was called to an emergency assembly. The auditorium felt cavernous with so many empty seats, visual proof of how many classmates we'd lost to the suspension wave. Hendrix took the stage looking haggard, his usually perfect tie slightly askew. Behind him stood two security guards and what looked like a district administrator I didn't recognize. "Students," he began, his voice lacking its usual authoritative boom, "it has come to my attention that certain individuals have been spreading misinformation about our disciplinary policies to parents and media outlets." My blood turned to ice. He knew about our campaign. "Let me be absolutely clear," Hendrix continued, his eyes scanning the reduced crowd with laser focus. "Any student found to be coordinating opposition to legitimate school policies will face immediate expulsion. Not suspension, expulsion. Permanent removal from this institution." The auditorium was dead silent. Around me, I could feel my remaining classmates shrinking into their seats. This wasn't just administrative overreach anymore. This was a direct threat to our futures, college applications, graduation requirements, everything we'd worked toward for 4 years. Furthermore, Hendrix said, clearly enjoying the fear he'd instilled, "I want to remind you that defamation is a serious legal matter. Students who continue to make false or misleading statements about school personnel or policies may face consequences beyond the educational realm." He was threatening to sue us. 17 and 18-year-old kids. That's when I felt something shift inside my chest, not fear, but pure, crystallized rage. This man wasn't just destroying our school culture or our senior year traditions. He was trying to terrorize us into compliance by threatening our entire futures. I looked around the auditorium at my classmates, kids I'd grown up with, learned alongside, shared 4 years of memories with. They looked defeated, scared, broken. And in that moment, I made a decision that would either save our school or get me expelled trying. I stood up. The auditorium went dead silent as I rose from my seat in Section B, Row 7. Every head turned toward me, including Principal Hendrix, whose face shifted from smug satisfaction to barely contained fury in the span of 2 seconds. "Mr. Chen," he said, his voice echoing through the microphone with dangerous calm. "Please sit down." "No sir, I don't think I will." The words came out steadier than I felt. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure the entire auditorium could hear it, but something about seeing my classmates' defeated faces had flipped a switch in my brain. The fear was still there, but it was buried under layers of righteous anger and 4 years of student government training. "You want to talk about defamation and misinformation?" I continued, my voice carrying clearly in the silent space. "Let's talk about facts. Fact number 1, you denied a diabetic student access to life-saving medical supplies. I have video evidence." Hendrix stepped away from the podium, gesturing frantically to the security guards. "Sit down immediately or face immediate expulsion." "Fact number 2, I continued, ignoring him completely, you've suspended 127 students, nearly 5% of our entire school population, for the crime of showing solidarity with their classmates. The largest mass suspension in district history, according to the data I pulled from the state education website." Behind me, I heard someone gasp. Then another voice, "He's right." I recognized it as belonging to Jessica Walsh from my chemistry class. "Fact number 3, I said, feeling momentum building, this isn't your first time destroying a school community. Desert Ridge High School in Arizona. Lincoln Prep in Michigan. Roosevelt Secondary in Tennessee. Same policies, same consulting firm, same pattern of administrative abuse." The security guards were moving up the aisles now, but I wasn't finished. "And here's my personal favorite fact," I said, pulling out my phone and holding it up so everyone could see. At exactly 7:23 this morning, I received a text message from Channel 7 News. They're running a story tonight at 6 p.m. titled, "Mass Suspensions Rock Local High School." They interviewed 12 parents yesterday, including 3 who are considering legal action. Hendrix grabbed the microphone. "That device should have been confiscated. All phones are banned during." "Actually," I interrupted, surprised by how calm I sounded, "I'm not a student right now. As of 7:30 this morning, my parents officially withdrew me from Westfield High School pending the resolution of this situation. Same with Maya Patterson, Trevor Martinez, and 15 other families as of last night." The auditorium erupted. Students were turning in their seats, whispering frantically. Several kids were pulling out their own phones. Apparently my little revelation had reminded them that Hendrix's phone policy was only enforceable if they stayed enrolled. The district administrator behind Hendrix, a woman I now recognized as Deputy Superintendent Martinez, stepped forward and whispered something urgent in his ear. His face went completely white. "Furthermore," I continued, riding the wave of chaos, "every parent who withdrew their child has formally requested a district investigation into academic excellence solutions and their contract with this school. Turns out, hiring private consultants to implement disciplinary policies without school board approval violates about 6 different state regulations." That last part was actually Maya's research, delivered to me via text at 6:45 a.m. Her mom might be a librarian, but she had a scary talent for digging through bureaucratic loopholes. Security finally reached my row, but I had one more card to play. "The emergency school board meeting has been moved to tonight at 7 p.m. in the district office," I announced as they approached. "Public comment period starts at 7:30. Funny how that works, right after the news story airs. As the guards reached for my arms, I looked directly at Principal Hendrix, who was standing frozen at the podium like a deer in headlights. "The thing about declaring war on teenagers," I said, loud enough for my voice to carry to the back rows, "is that we have way more free time than you do. And we're really, really good at social media." The last thing I saw before they escorted me out was the expression on Hendrix's face, and for the first time in 2 weeks, he looked like a man who knew he was beaten. The news story aired at exactly 6:03 p.m., and by 6:15, my phone was blowing up with screenshots and reactions. Channel 7 had done their homework. Sarah's mom had delivered everything we'd compiled, the timeline of policy changes, interviews with suspended students' parents, and most damaging of all, a side-by-side comparison of Hendrix's reforms at his 3 previous schools. They'd even managed to get Deputy Superintendent Martinez on camera, looking visibly uncomfortable as she claimed the district was reviewing all recent policy implementations. But the real bombshell came at the end of the segment, when investigative reporter Janet Morrison dropped a detail that made my stomach flip. Channel 7 has obtained documents showing that Academic Excellence Solutions has billed the district $47,000 for consulting services over the past month, payments that appear to have been approved without proper school board oversight. $47,000. In 4 weeks. For what? Teaching administrators how to terrorize teenagers more efficiently. Maya called me immediately after the broadcast ended. Holy shit, Alex. Did you know about the money? No clue, I said, pacing around my bedroom. But it explains why Hendricks looked like he was going to throw up when Martinez whispered to him today. My mom's been digging through public records all afternoon, Maya continued. Turns out Academic Excellence Solutions is owned by Hendricks' brother-in-law. We're not just dealing with administrative incompetence, we're dealing with straight-up corruption. The implications hit me like a truck. This wasn't some misguided attempt at educational reform. Hendricks had been systematically destroying school cultures across the country while funneling taxpayer money to his family. We weren't just his victims, we were his business model. By 6:30, cars were already lining up outside the district office for the emergency school board meeting. I arrived with my parents at 6:45 to find a crowd of at least 200 people, mostly parents, but also teachers, students, and what looked like reporters from 3 different news outlets. The energy was unlike anything I'd experienced. These weren't just frustrated parents anymore, they were citizens who discovered their tax dollars were being stolen while their kids were being psychologically tormented. Mrs. Davidson, Emma's mom, had printed out copies of the consulting contract and was distributing them to anyone who'd listen. Mr. Williams, Marcus's dad, was showing people a video of his son's debate trophy being confiscated for promoting individual achievement over collective discipline. At 7 o'clock sharp, the 5 school board members filed into the meeting room looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Board President Jennifer Walsh, no relation to Jessica from my chemistry class, called the meeting to order with a voice that suggested she'd been fielding angry phone calls all day. Before we begin, she announced, I want to acknowledge that this board has received over 300 emails and calls regarding recent disciplinary policies at Westfield High School. We take these concerns very seriously. The public comment period was supposed to last 30 minutes. It went for an hour and 45 minutes. Parent after parent stepped up to the microphone with increasingly damning testimonies. Mrs. Chen, Sarah's mom, not related to me either, had documentation proving that Jenny Morrison's diabetic accommodation had been legally required since 2017. Mr. Patterson, Maya's dad, presented evidence that the consulting fees violated 3 different state procurement laws. Even Mrs. Rodriguez, the lunch monitor who'd started the cafeteria uprising, showed up to testify that she'd been hired by the consulting firm, not the school district, and had been told to implement policies that she knew were educationally harmful. But the moment that changed everything came at 8:47 p.m., when a woman I didn't recognize approached the microphone and introduced herself as Linda Kowalski, former PTA president at Desert Ridge High School in Arizona. I drove 12 hours to be here tonight, she said, her voice shaking with emotion, because I couldn't let another community go through what Richard Hendricks did to our children. The policies you're seeing now. They're identical to what he implemented in Phoenix. Word for word. The same consulting firm, the same manufactured crises, the same systematic destruction of school culture. And when our students finally fought back, when parents demanded accountability, he disappeared in the middle of the night. Left our school $80,000 in debt and our kids traumatized. The room went completely silent. Even the board members were staring at her with open shock. Check his references, she continued. Actually check them. Because if you had, you would have discovered that Academic Excellence Solutions has been investigated by education departments in 4 states. You would have learned that Richard Hendricks has never successfully completed a full contract at any school he's worked at. She paused, looking directly at Board President Walsh. Most importantly, you would have discovered that he's not actually a licensed school administrator in this state. His credentials expired in Michigan 3 years ago. The room erupted. The room erupted into chaos. Board members were frantically whispering to each other, parents were shouting questions, and I could see Deputy Superintendent Martinez frantically typing on her phone in the back corner. Board President Walsh banged her gavel repeatedly. Order. We need order. But Linda Kowalski wasn't finished. She pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. I brought copies of everything. The investigation reports from Tennessee. The lawsuit settlements from Michigan. The criminal complaint filed in Arizona for misappropriation of funds. Criminal complaint. The words hit the room like a physical force. Mrs. Kowalski, Walsh said, her voice barely steady, are you saying that Mr. Hendricks is currently under criminal investigation? I'm saying that Richard Hendricks has left a trail of financial irregularities and violated education codes in 4 states. I'm saying that Academic Excellence Solutions is currently being investigated by the IRS for tax fraud. And I'm saying that if you don't act tonight, he'll disappear again and do this to another community. Maya grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin just like they had during that first assembly 3 weeks ago. But this time, her grip wasn't from fear, it was from pure vindication. At 9:15 p.m., the board called for a 20-minute recess. I watched through the window as 3 board members huddled in the parking lot with their phones, clearly making urgent calls. Deputy Superintendent Martinez had disappeared entirely. This is insane, Trevor said, appearing at my shoulder. Are we watching a school board meeting or a criminal investigation? Both, I think, I replied, still processing everything we'd just heard. 3 weeks ago, I'd been worried about prom and college applications. Now I was apparently the student leader of a movement that had uncovered actual fraud. When the board reconvened at 9:40, President Walsh looked like she'd aged 5 years in 20 minutes. After consulting with our legal counsel, she began, the board is implementing the following immediate actions. First, all disciplinary policies implemented since August 15th are hereby suspended pending a full investigation. The crowd cheered, but Walsh held up her hand. Second, all students currently suspended for nonviolent infractions will have their records cleared and may return to school tomorrow. More cheers, louder this time. Third, we are immediately terminating our contract with Academic Excellence Solutions and launching a forensic audit of all related expenditures. The cheering stopped. Everyone was waiting for the big one. Walsh took a deep breath. Finally, Principal Richard Hendricks has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending the outcome of a comprehensive investigation into his credentials and conduct. The room exploded again, but this time it was pure celebration. Parents were hugging, students were crying with relief, and I felt like I could finally breathe for the first time in 3 weeks. But as we filed out of the meeting at 10:30 p.m., Maya pulled me aside with a worried expression. "Alex, what if he runs again? Like he did in Arizona?" I thought about it for a moment, watching the crowd of parents and students celebrating in the parking lot. 3 weeks ago, Richard Hendricks had walked into our school thinking he could break us down systematically, turn us into compliant prisoners in his educational experiment. "Let him try," I said finally. "But this time, we know who he is. This time, we have documentation. And this time, Linda Kowalski proved something really important." "What's that?" I grinned, feeling exhausted but victorious. That when communities fight back and actually investigate these people, they can be stopped. Permanently. Maya smiled back, but I could see she was thinking the same thing I was. We'd won the battle, but Hendricks was still out there somewhere, and desperate people did unpredictable things. The war wasn't over yet. Friday morning felt like stepping into an alternate universe. After 3 weeks of navigating Westfield's hallways like a prison compound, seeing students laughing in groups and teachers actually smiling was almost disorienting. Maya met me at my locker at 7:45 a.m. with 2 cups of coffee and a grin that hadn't left her face since the board meeting. "Emergency student government meeting," she announced. "We need to figure out how to actually run a school again." She was right. With Hendricks on administrative leave and most of his policies suspended, we were in uncharted territory. Mrs. Patterson had been appointed interim principal, but she'd made it clear that she wanted student input on returning to normal operations. The meeting was packed. Not just the usual student government crowd, but kids from every grade level who'd become accidental activists over the past month. Sarah Chen had compiled a list of every canceled tradition and activity that needed to be reinstated. Trevor had drafted a proposal for a student administrative advisory committee to prevent future policy disasters. But it was Jordan Chen who dropped the bombshell that made my stomach sink. "My sister works at the district office," he said quietly. She heard Deputy Superintendent Martinez on the phone this morning. Hendricks cleared out his office at 5 a.m. Took everything, computer, files, even his coffee mug. Security footage shows him loading boxes into his car when the building was supposed to be locked. The room went dead silent. Maya was the first to speak. "He ran. Just like Arizona. Gets worse," Jordan continued. "Martinez told my sister they can't find any of the original Academic Excellence Solutions contracts. Like, the physical documents are missing. And the consulting payments? They were all processed through some kind of emergency authorization system that Hendricks had access to. My blood turned to ice. He destroyed evidence. Probably. But here's the really messed up part, his brother-in-law, the guy who owns Academic Excellence Solutions. He filed paperwork yesterday to dissolve the company. Just disappeared it completely." Sarah looked up from her laptop. That's not how investigations work, right? You can't just destroy a company while you're being investigated. "You can if you're fast enough and you know which loopholes to exploit," said a voice from the doorway. We all turned to see Mrs. Patterson standing there with a grim expression and a manila folder in her hands. "Mrs. Patterson," I said, standing up. "We were just—" "I know what you were discussing," she interrupted. "And I'm afraid Jordan's information is correct. Mr. Hendricks appears to have spent most of last night removing materials from his office." She sat down heavily in one of the student desks. "I've been interim principal for less than 24 hours and I'm already dealing with missing budget documents, deleted computer files, and a consulting contract that seems to have vanished entirely." Maya leaned forward. "What does that mean for the investigation?" "It means," Mrs. Patterson said with a sigh, "that unless someone has copies of key evidence, Richard Hendricks might actually get away with this. Again." That's when I remembered something that made my heart race. During all those phone calls to parents, all those research sessions in Trevor's basement, all those late-night strategy meetings, we've been documenting everything. "Wait," I said, pulling out my phone. "Maya, you still have all those screenshots of the policy announcements, right?" "Every single one. Time-stamped and backed up to 3 different cloud accounts." "And Sarah, your mom kept recordings of the parent interviews? Plus transcripts. She's a journalist, she documents everything." I felt a surge of hope. "Trevor, what about those consulting receipts your mom copied from the district office?" "Still have them. She made extras for her own records." Mrs. Patterson was staring at us with something approaching amazement. "Are you telling me that you students have more complete documentation than the district office?" "We're telling you," Maya said with a growing smile, "that Richard Hendricks might be a professional evidence destroyer, but he made one critical mistake." "What's that?" I grinned, feeling the same rush I'd experienced during yesterday's board meeting. "He underestimated a bunch of teenagers with smartphones and too much free time." Mrs. Patterson actually laughed. "In that case, I think you're about to become very popular with some investigators from the state education department. They're arriving Monday morning." As we filed out of the meeting, I felt a mixture of pride and nervous energy. We'd saved our school and potentially stopped a criminal enterprise. But looking at the relieved faces of my classmates, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to discover something even bigger than we'd imagined. The state investigators arrived Monday morning at 8 a.m. sharp, and by 8:30, they'd set up what looked like a miniature FBI operation in the district conference room. Special Agent Rebecca Martinez, no relation to our deputy superintendent, had requested that all students with documentation meet with her team during second period. Walking into that conference room felt surreal. 3 weeks ago, I'd been worrying about calculus tests and college essays. Now I was sitting across from a woman with a federal badge who was asking me about financial fraud and interstate criminal activity. "Mr. Chen," Agent Martinez began, spreading our compiled evidence across the table, "this is remarkably comprehensive documentation. Tell me, what made you start recording everything?" "Honestly, I was just angry," I said. "But Maya, she's the one who realized we needed proof. She said nobody would believe us otherwise." Maya, sitting beside me, pulled out her laptop. I documented every policy change, every suspension, every interaction with administrators. Timestamps, witness accounts, everything. Agent Martinez exchanged glances with her partner, Agent Thompson, who'd been quietly reviewing Trevor's mom's financial documents. This level of systematic record-keeping, it's actually more detailed than what we typically see from school districts themselves. That's when Agent Thompson dropped something that made my stomach lurch. We've been tracking academic excellence solutions for 18 months, he said, not looking up from his papers. You're not the first students to contact us. We've received complaints from families in 6 different states, but until now, we've never had this level of contemporaneous documentation. 6 states. Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. How many schools has he destroyed? Agent Martinez's expression grew grim. Richard Hendricks, using various shell companies and aliases, has implemented similar programs at 14 different schools across the country. The total amount of misappropriated funds we're tracking exceeds $600,000. The number hit the room like a physical blow. Trevor was the first to recover. $600,000. What was he even doing with all that money? That's what we're trying to determine, Agent Thompson replied. But based on your documentation and similar evidence from other districts, we believe Hendricks was running a sophisticated operation. Create artificial crises at schools, get hired as a consultant to fix them, bill excessive fees to multiple family-owned companies, then disappear before anyone can audit the results. Maya leaned forward. So he was literally getting paid to torture kids. More than that, Agent Martinez said. He was getting paid to torture kids, steal taxpayer money, and then move on to the next community. A nearly perfect crime, except for one thing. She gestured to the mountain of evidence we compiled, screenshots, recordings, financial documents, even video footage from Jenny's diabetic incident. He never counted on his victims fighting back this effectively. Most school communities just endure the chaos until he moves on. You did something different. You organized, you documented, and most importantly, you reached out to other communities he targeted. That's when Agent Thompson's phone rang. He answered it quietly, but I caught enough of his side of the conversation to realize something big was happening. Copy that. Are you certain? Okay, we'll notify the local team immediately. He hung up and turned to Agent Martinez with an expression I couldn't quite read. What is it? She asked. Richard Hendricks was arrested this morning at Denver International Airport. TSA flagged him trying to board a flight to Mexico with $47,000 in cash and identification documents under 3 different names. The conference room went completely silent. Maya grabbed my arm, her now familiar death grip that meant either panic or vindication. He was running, I said, the pieces clicking together. He knew we had him. Agent Martinez nodded grimly. He knew you had him. The question now is whether we can prove everything he's done over the past 5 years. She looked directly at me, then at Maya, Sarah, and Trevor. Think you're up for one more fight? The phone call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, 3 days after Hendricks' arrest. I was half asleep when Maya's panicked voice jolted me awake. Alex, we have a problem. A big one. I sat up, instantly alert. What's wrong? Sarah just called me crying. Her mom got a call from Agent Martinez an hour ago. Hendricks made bail. My blood turned to ice. How is that possible? He was caught with fake IDs and $50,000 cash. His lawyer argued he wasn't a flight risk because he has deep community ties in Colorado, where he apparently owns property under his real name. The judge bought it. I was already getting dressed, phone wedged between my shoulder and ear. Where is he now? That's the problem, nobody knows. He posted bail at 6 p.m. and immediately disappeared again. But Alex, that's not even the worst part. My stomach dropped. What else? Agent Martinez said Hendricks' lawyer filed motions challenging the validity of our evidence. Claiming we illegally recorded conversations, violated privacy laws, and that anything we collected is inadmissible because we're minors. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Can they do that? Can they just throw out everything we worked for? I don't know, but Agent Thompson wants to meet with all of us tomorrow morning. Emergency session. After hanging up, I spent the rest of the night staring at my ceiling, replaying every conversation, every recorded interaction, every piece of evidence we'd gathered. Had we actually screwed up the entire investigation by being too thorough? The next morning's meeting felt like a funeral. Agent Martinez looked exhausted, surrounded by legal documents and empty coffee cups. Agent Thompson was pacing behind her, occasionally muttering what sounded like creative profanity. Let me be direct, Agent Martinez began without her usual pleasantries. Hendricks' legal team is very good, and they're arguing that most of your evidence was obtained through illegal surveillance by minors. But we were just documenting what was happening to us, Maya protested. How is that illegal? It's not, Agent Thompson said firmly. But Hendricks hired Catherine Walsh, no relation to your school board president, and she's one of the best defense attorneys in the state. She's throwing every possible legal challenge at us to create reasonable doubt. Sarah raised her hand hesitantly. What about Linda Kowalski's testimony? The evidence from Arizona and Michigan? Agent Martinez's expression darkened. That's problem number 2. We contacted authorities in Phoenix yesterday to gather corroborating evidence. Turns out most of the records from Desert Ridge High School were destroyed in a routine document purging last month. Same thing happened in Michigan, convenient computer crashes that wiped administrative files. He's been cleaning up his trail, I said, the pieces falling into place. Even after he got arrested. Worse than that, Agent Thompson replied. We think he's been planning this for months. Maybe years. Every district he's hit, key evidence starts disappearing about 6 months after he leaves. Trevor looked up from his phone. So what you're telling us is that we caught a criminal, we documented everything perfectly, and he's still going to get away with it. Agent Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out a manila folder I hadn't noticed before. Not necessarily. Remember when I said Hendricks had never counted on his victims fighting back effectively? Well, yesterday we discovered something that changes everything. She opened the folder to reveal bank statements, wire transfer records, and what looked like tax documents. Academic excellence solutions might be dissolved, but money doesn't just disappear. Financial crimes leave paper trails that are much harder to destroy than school records. And thanks to your documentation providing exact dates and amounts, we were able to trace every payment Hendricks received. Agent Thompson stopped pacing and grinned for the first time since I'd met him. Turns out Richard Hendricks made one critical mistake. He's been so focused on destroying educational evidence that he forgot about financial evidence. The IRS doesn't purge documents. Neither do banks. Maya leaned forward. What did you find? Agent Martinez smiled grimly. Proof that he's been running this operation since 2015. 14 schools, 8 different shell companies, and over $800,000 in fraudulent billing. But here's the beautiful part, Agent Thompson added. Every fraudulent payment was processed using forged administrative authorizations. That's federal wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and identity theft. Even if he destroys every school record in America, those financial crimes are ironclad. I felt a surge of hope, but something was still bothering me. If you have him on financial charges, why do you still need our evidence? Agent Martinez's expression grew serious again. Because Richard Hendricks isn't working alone. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Agent Martinez opened another file, this one thick with photographs and organizational charts that looked like something from a crime drama. We've identified at least 3 other individuals who've been systematically moving between school districts, implementing similar programs, she continued. Dr. Patricia Vance, currently terrorizing students at Riverside High in Oregon. Marcus Webb, who just got hired as an educational consultant in North Carolina. And Jennifer Blackstone, who's been operating under 5 different aliases across Texas and New Mexico. My head was spinning. You're telling us there's an entire network of these people? What we're telling you, Agent Thompson said, pulling out his laptop, is that you've helped us uncover the largest educational fraud scheme in federal history. They've been operating like a criminal enterprise, sharing strategies, rotating between districts, even coordinating their timelines to avoid detection. He clicked through a series of documents on his screen. Look at this timeline. Hendricks leaves Arizona in March 2018. Dr. Vance gets hired at the same district in August 2018, implementing identical policies. When parents start complaining, she transfers to Oregon, and Marcus Webb mysteriously appears in Arizona with the same playbook. Sarah was frantically taking notes. How many schools are we talking about? 47 confirmed districts across 15 states, Agent Martinez replied. Conservative estimate of $2.3 million in fraudulent fees, plus immeasurable psychological damage to thousands of students. Maya looked up from her phone, her face pale. I've been checking social media while you were talking. There's a hashtag trending, hashtag zero tolerance scam. Students from other schools are posting their own horror stories. Look at this. She held up her screen showing a video from a girl who couldn't have been older than 15. This is exactly what happened at our school in Dallas, the girl was saying, tears streaming down her face. They canceled our homecoming, suspended half the senior class, and then our principal just disappeared. We thought we were the only ones. Agent Thompson nodded grimly. Once news of Hendricks' arrest broke, we started hearing from victims nationwide. The problem is, most of these communities just endured the abuse until the administrators moved on. Nobody fought back like you did. But here's what's really disturbing, Agent Martinez continued, pulling out another set of documents. We found communications between Hendricks and his network discussing what they call resistance management. They've been studying student protests, learning how to neutralize opposition more effectively. She handed me a printed email that made my stomach churn. It was from Hendricks to someone called P.Vance at educationfirst.com, dated 2 weeks after our cafeteria uprising. Patricia, Westfield situation escalating faster than anticipated. Students more organized than typical demographics. Recommend implementing communication restriction protocol immediately if you encounter similar resistance. Coordinated documentation appears to be their primary weapon. RH. He was sharing intelligence about us, I said, the implications hitting like a sledgehammer. Teaching other people how to stop kids from fighting back. Gets worse, Agent Thompson said. That email was sent from a secure server we traced to a communications company in Delaware. These people aren't just random administrators causing chaos, they're running a sophisticated criminal organization with IT infrastructure, legal support, and coordinated counterintelligence. Trevor looked up from reading over my shoulder. Counterintelligence? Against high school students? Are you serious? Dead serious, Agent Martinez replied. And that's why we need your help with something that goes way beyond Richard Hendricks. She leaned forward, her expression intense. We want you to help us catch all of them. The FBI field office in downtown felt like something out of a movie as Agent Martinez led us through security checkpoints and down sterile hallways lined with official portraits. It was 2:30 p.m. on a Thursday, and I should have been in AP Physics worrying about momentum equations. Instead, I was about to become part of a federal investigation that spanned 15 states. Before we go any further, Agent Martinez said, stopping outside conference room C, I need to be completely transparent about what we're asking. This isn't just about testifying or providing evidence anymore. We want you to help us run an active operation. Maya grabbed my arm, that familiar death grip that had become our unofficial signal for, holy shit, what are we getting into now? What kind of operation? I asked, though part of me already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. Agent Thompson opened the conference room door to reveal a setup that looked like mission control, multiple computers, wall-mounted monitors displaying maps with red pins scattered across the country, and a whiteboard covered in photographs connected by red string like something from a conspiracy thriller. Welcome to Operation Clean Slate, Agent Martinez announced. 3 weeks ago, you were just high school students trying to save your prom. Today, you're our best hope for dismantling a criminal network that's been operating for nearly a decade. She gestured to the wall of monitors. 47 schools, 15 states, over 12,000 students affected. But here's the problem, adult investigators can't infiltrate high schools without raising suspicions. School boards won't talk to federal agents unless they're forced to. And most victims don't even realize they're part of a larger pattern. Trevor was staring at one of the monitors showing a school layout that looked eerily familiar. Is that Riverside High in Oregon? Where Dr. Vance is working? Correct. And according to social media monitoring, students there are starting to organize resistance activities. Sound familiar? It did sound familiar, almost identical to our early strategy sessions in Trevor's basement. My stomach nodded as I realized what they were suggesting. You want us to contact them, Sarah said quietly. To coordinate with other schools. More than that, Agent Thompson replied, pulling up what looked like intercepted communications on his laptop. We want you to appear to be coordinating with them while actually feeding us intelligence about how this network operates. He clicked through several encrypted messages between email addresses I didn't recognize. Hendricks and his associates have been monitoring students' social media, learning from your success at Westfield. They're developing new strategies to prevent organized resistance. But they're also getting sloppy, Agent Martinez added with a slight smile. Success made them overconfident. They're communicating more frequently, sharing more detailed plans, and most importantly, they're underestimating teenagers. Maya leaned forward, studying the message threads. These emails, they're talking about us specifically. Look at this one from yesterday. She pointed to a message from m.web@consulting@gmail.com to multiple recipients. Westfield incident confirms need for immediate social media suppression protocols. Recommend confiscating all devices within 48 hours of implementation. Cannot allow documentation period like Arizona situation. They're terrified of us, I realized, feeling a strange mixture of pride and fear. They've completely changed their playbook because of what we did. Exactly, Agent Thompson said. Which gives us a unique opportunity. They expect adult law enforcement to follow predictable patterns. They don't expect teenagers to be working directly with federal investigators. Agent Martinez pulled out a thick folder labeled Operation Parameters, classified. Here's what we're proposing. You continue your advocacy work, but with federal backing and protection. You help us identify schools under attack, coordinate evidence collection, and most importantly, you help other student groups resist these policies while we build cases against the administrators. She paused, looking directly at each of us. But I need you to understand the risks. If Hendricks Network realizes you're working with us, they'll target you personally. Legal challenges, harassment, potentially even physical intimidation. The room went quiet except for the hum of computer equipment and the distant sound of downtown traffic. How many more schools? I asked finally. Agent Martinez's expression darkened. We've identified 12 districts where network associates are currently active or recently hired. Thousands of students experiencing exactly what you went through. I looked at Maya, who was staring at the wall of affected schools with the same expression she'd had during our first rebellion planning session. Sarah was already taking notes, her journalist instincts kicking in. Trevor was studying the financial documents with the focus of someone whose mom worked in district accounting. When do we start? I asked. 6 months later, I stood in the same federal courthouse where Richard Hendricks had been sentenced to 8 years in prison, watching as the final member of his network was led away in handcuffs. Dar. Patricia Vance had just received a 6-year sentence for conspiracy, wire fraud, and racketeering, the harshest punishment yet for what the media had dubbed the zero-tolerance conspiracy. That's all of them, Agent Martinez said, appearing at my shoulder as courthouse security escorted Vance through the side door. Hendricks, Webb, Blackstone, and now Vance. 4 years of investigation, 47 schools, and it's finally over. Maya squeezed my hand as we walked down the courthouse steps into the afternoon sunlight. Behind us, parents and students from 12 different states were celebrating the end of a nightmare that had affected over 15,000 kids across the country. The final tally was staggering, $3.2 million in fraudulent consulting fees recovered, 847 suspensions overturned, and criminal charges filed in 6 states. But the numbers didn't capture what we'd really accomplished. Alex, a voice called from across the courthouse plaza. I turned to see Jessica Martinez, no relation to our FBI contact, jogging toward us with a huge grin. Jessica was a junior at Riverside High in Oregon, one of the first students we connected with during Operation Clean Slate. We got the news this morning, she said, slightly out of breath. Dr. Vance's conviction means our lawsuit against the district is moving forward. They're going to have to reinstate our graduation ceremony and restore all our traditions. Sarah appeared with her ever-present camera, documenting everything for the feature article she was writing for 3 different newspapers. Jessica, can you talk about what it meant to connect with other schools going through the same thing? It saved us, Jessica said without hesitation. When we found out we weren't alone, that there were kids everywhere fighting the same fight, it changed everything. We went from feeling powerless to realizing we were part of something huge. She was right. What had started as 4 angry teenagers trying to save their senior year had become a nationwide student movement. #ZeroTolerance scam had generated over 2.3 million posts across social media platforms. Student advocacy groups had formed in 28 states. Most importantly, the Department of Education had implemented new oversight requirements making it nearly impossible for criminal networks to exploit school districts. Trevor walked up carrying a thick folder of legal documents. The restitution payments are being processed, he announced. Every district gets their stolen money back, plus damages. Westfield's getting $127,000, enough to fund prom, senior activities, and college prep programs for the next 3 years. And the civil lawsuits? I asked. Settling out of court. My mom's firm estimates families affected by the network will receive over $800,000 total in damages. But the victory that meant the most to me came in a text message from Mrs. Patterson at 4:17 p.m. as we waited for our flight home. Spring fling was magical. Prom planning starts Monday. Student government has full autonomy restored. You saved more than just a school, you saved the idea that students deserve respect and dignity. Thank you. Mrs. P. Sitting in the airport terminal, watching Maya edit our final report to Agent Martinez while Sarah Liv tweeted the courthouse celebration and Trevor calculated exactly how much taxpayer money we'd helped recover, I realized something that would have seemed impossible 8 months ago. We'd actually done it. For high school students armed with smartphones and righteous anger had brought down a criminal conspiracy that had terrorized schools across America. The revolution had succeeded, and it was time to go home and plan the best prom Westfield High School had ever seen.